What is going on, everyone? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. Today, in this video, we're going to be looking at the Key Collector app and exploring a new category that they just released. They are showcasing 5 undervalued collectibles, in this case, comic books, of course. They're listing 5 books here that they feel to be undervalued for reasons that they are listing. I'm going to be exploring each one, and I'm going to be telling you all if I agree or disagree, and we're going to be deep nose diving into this. Before we get into it, if you aren't subscribed to the channel, please take some time to do so. Check out all the links in the description below. And I do want to remind you all, folks, we are still giving away this amazing, spectacular Spider-Man number 64, the first appearance of Cloak and Dagger. It's a 9.6 CGC signature series signed by Ed Hannigan. Folks, all you need to do to have a chance to win this book is make sure you're subscribed to the channel, hit that notification bell, hit the like button on this video, and comment below letting me know that you are subscribed to the channel. All right, everyone, let's get into it. The first book that Key Collector has on this list today is Wizard Magazine #1. What a classic, folks. I did have this book, but I don't know where it is. I lost a lot of my Wizard books through the years, unfortunately. But this is where it all started with Wizard Magazine. Amazing Spidey cover art by Todd McFarlane. So let's explore what they're stating here and why they have this book on an undervalued list. But before we do that, I'm going to say one more thing. I have said before, and I'm going to state it again, I think the term undervalued is thrown around way too much in this community, way too much by, maybe people on YouTube and in forums. Undervalued doesn't necessarily mean that a book is going to appreciate, because there are many books that are going to continue to appreciate in value, but it doesn't mean that they're undervalued. So when we look at the actual textbook definition of undervalued, it means that, essentially we aren't valuing a book as much as we feel it should be in a specific moment in time, like currently. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with what it's going to do a year, 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. It has to do with intrinsically, what does this book have to offer me right now, and how am I valuing? Now let's look into this Wizard Magazine #1. They talk about, 100,000 copies were in circulation. Obviously, the cover art by Todd McFarlane, and how did Todd McFarlane pull out? And these are some of the bullet points that they're stating for it to be undervalued. The secondary market is slow to acknowledge its nostalgic weight in dollars. Okay, so they're going back to how I define undervalued. They're saying that right now we're at a point to where this book that came out just over 30 years ago now, it is essentially, you could call it vintage, but it is absolutely nostalgic. It's over 30 years old now. So we are at a moment in time where we can look back and say, for right now, this book can absolutely be undervalued, because maybe we're not really seeing 1991 is 30 plus years ago. Maybe we're not really seeing what time has done, and those individuals that were kids collecting this book back in the early 90s or picking up this book off the shelf, what it means to them now as they are, in their 30s and 40s and 50s or so, however old they are now. They do bring a lot of comparisons into the Overstreet guide to say, well, look, the Overstreet's first guide is very much a collectible that's, an all-time high sale, says here, for a 9.2, sold for $4,800. Wizards all-time sold for $1,300 and a 9.6, right? And then down here they do say it's not a perfect comparison. It's not apples to apples here, but, a 9.6 copy of Overstreet signed by Robert Overstreet sold for $45.6. Wow, $45,600 in 2021. That's crazy. Here's my thoughts on this. I like the comparison to the Overstreet guides, but that's more of a future number. What this is going to do on the future market, not how we value it today. Overstreet is much older still. It's got 20 years on Wizard #1, and it's like the original guide. So Wizard can never replace that, but Wizard does mean something to that different generation. So do I believe that this book is undervalued? I think in totality, it's more of that this book is going to become more of a valuable book over time in the future market, next to stating that it's really undervalued right now. but I do feel that there is some slight undervaluing. I do. I don't think it's a crazy amount, but I do feel that there are people out there right now that collect comics, that are putting their money into the hobby, that haven't really noticed Wizard #1 as it is in terms of these nostalgic and vintage factors, because now it's 30 plus years old. I don't think it's registered in people's heads yet. So I do think right now there is more value to be realized on the current market, but I don't think it's a huge gap from what it's selling for right now. I do feel that more eyes are going to continue to be pulled to this book as it ages out over the next 5 and of course 10 years. And I think the fair market value that we see for it on the market is going to continue to grow and reflect that. So I don't think this is a book that is necessarily going to stay undervalued for long, because again, as it ages out, people are going to be on this, in my humble opinion. People are going to absolutely be on this and be demanding this for future years to come. All right. But what that does say is this could be something that, and again, I'm not here to tell you all to buy or invest in anything. It could mean, though, if you are in the market for something like this as a collectible, as a long-term investment, it could be a good time to look into this instead of waiting a few more years and seeing how it continues to increase on the market, right? Next up, this is going to be a fun one. This is Amazing Spider-Man #134. This is the first appearance of Tarantula. First cover appearance as well. He's right there. Awesome cover. This is also the second appearance of the Punisher in Cameo. Now, you guys may remember a long time ago, I made a video discussing how I felt Key Collector was wrong with labeling 134 as the second appearance of Punisher, and I believe at the time they were labeling 135 as the third appearance. And while those aren't essentially wrong, I'm all about context, because if you look at precedent, this appearance of the Punisher right here is obviously a cameo, where 135 is, in my humble opinion, his second full appearance, but it is his third overall appearance. And I also talked about how CGC has this wrong, because CGC, from what I remember, doesn't notate Punisher at all in this book, and they notate 135 as simply the second appearance of Punisher. So I believe that Key Collector and CGC weren't adding proper context, because what CGC should be doing to 135, in my humble opinion, is stating it is the second full appearance. So one thing that I give a lot of credit to Key Collector for doing here with the 134 and the 135s, right here, they say, many sources cite the Amazing Spider-Man 135 as the second appearance of the Punisher and categorize this appearance as a cameo. And again, I just said, for me to be completely accurate, 134 is second appearance of Punisher in cameo, and 135 is his second full appearance / third overall appearance. That's how I look at it. But why are they declaring this book to be undervalued? They talk about the Wolverine. I'm not going to talk about this Hulk 181 theory. I'm going to go down here and look at what they're doing with Moon Knight. They say, to determine if Punisher's second appearance is undervalued, we'll compare it to Moon Knight's, published 2 months later. And Moon Knight's second appearance was Werewolf by Night 33. They say both characters share a less merciful approach to fighting crime. While Moon Knight's star power is at an all-time high, true, the Punisher's impact in comics and pop culture cannot be underscored. Very true. And I've always said there's a lot of overlap or parallels between Moon Knight and Punisher, and even Wolverine. I think they all have a certain branding and a certain cult following. Now here they bring up some numbers to gauge Werewolf by Night 33, the second appearance of Moon Knight, next to Amazing Spider-Man 34, what I would call the second appearance of Punisher in cameo. All right, so Werewolf by Night is these numbers right here, 33, Werewolf by Night 33, next to ASM 134. So you can see that, these numbers are more than doubled on the 9.6 and the 9.2, almost doubled on a 9.0, so doubled in a 6.0, more than doubled on a 4.0. So you can see that the Werewolf by Night 33 definitely commands a higher value. But the one thing you got to take in consideration here too is for these higher grades at least, there's a lot, it seems like there's a lot more on the census for Amazing Spider-Man 134, but as I always say, I think that could just be because of the past popularity of the Punisher, where now with, like they just said, Moon Knight being at a height of his popularity, these numbers could definitely change. You can see a lot more people sending in Werewolf by Night 33 to get graded that can boost up those census numbers. So don't get caught up on census numbers saying, oh, well, it only has 41 on the census, so that must means I should pay 2,700 for it, and I'm only paying 900 for this because it has so many more. Don't look at it that black and white. But here's my problem with this comparison. Werewolf by Night 33 is Moon Knight's second appearance, but it's a full appearance. He's in the story. Whereas in Amazing Spider-Man 134, Punisher has nothing to do with the story. Spider-Man is facing off with Tarantula. And then at the final page, you get the Punishers. You see his foot and like his gun. And then in the third panel, you see his face and his body standing over Spider-Man. And it leads into his second full appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 135. So you don't get the Punisher on the cover of 134. You don't get him actually like in the story. So I cannot sit here and compare these apples to apples, in my humble opinion. This second appearance of the Punisher will never be seen as the second appearance of Werewolf by Night. As Moon Knight in Werewolf by Night 33. This is still a cameo, and he's not on the cover. So it would be hard for me to say that even though it being Punisher, and maybe Punisher will always be a more popular character than Moon Knight, I don't know. 135 is always going to command more value than 134 because it is a full appearance, and Punisher is on the cover of 135. And I just want to throw a reminder out there. By textbook definition and by precedent, full appearance and cameo doesn't have to do with body parts, how we see them on the page. If we only see a leg, or if we only see a face, or we see a full body even though he's on the last panel, that's a full appearance. Precedent and textbook definition states that those things are null and void and they don't matter. It doesn't matter. So I'm sticking to my guns. This is a cameo appearance, but you guys are probably asking, Chris, answer the question. Do you still think it's undervalued? I do think this book is undervalued. I absolutely think this book is undervalued. And why is that? Well, because nobody ever recognized this as any type of appearance of Punisher before. I guarantee you, probably until Key Collector started the controversy by saying this was Punisher's second appearance, unless you actually read the books, you probably never knew that Punisher even showed up in this book, even if it may just be a last page cameo. But he did. So this is the second appearance of Punisher in cameo, and that means something to collectors. That means something to collectors. And now that, 129, his first appearance, is a blue chip key, and 135 has been heavily increasing in value. This one right here is now getting recognized and getting more attention, and people are going to command this book. Now, let's look at what this book's been doing on the market. Let's pull up 9.6 sales recently, and we could see, well, there hasn't been a sale this year. The last one was in December of 2021 for that 900, but you can see, look guys, you have a little bit of ebb and flow here between the years, and, I always say this when you're looking at graded numbers, there's a very small sample size, so you can't look at them as huge dips or increases in between. You got to take them with a grain of salt. But you can see, going back to 2016, this book has absolutely been increasing, even though, it hit 350 here, dipped back down to a 240 sale here, back up to 380 here, 250 here, but then it started hitting the 600s, then the 899. Let's look at 9.4. You haven't had a sale since 2020, but going back to 2016 looks like it increased some. But look, you got a more recent one of a 9.2, which dwarfs every sale in years past. Let's see if we can find another grade with a more recent. Here we go. How about a 7.5? A more recent sale. This was just about a week ago. A 7.5 sold for $275. dwarfs any other sales from the last few years. Look at that. Same with the 7.0, about double here from a year before. Not even a year before. That was August of last year. So already people are turning their eyes to this book. And I do think that when you look at future value, this is going to increase over time no matter what. But I think it is currently undervalued because people don't understand the significance of this being an early Punisher appearance, whether you want to just call it the second appearance without any more context, or you do want to realize and recognize that it is a cameo appearance. So I think this is an absolute good pick, but for me, I would just label it with more of the proper context that I see fit. We're going to move on to the third book they have, and this is Daredevil number 7. This is the debut of the classic red costume. Why do they have this undervalued? Well, they say, look, it's a very iconic suit, obviously. I mean, most of us, especially people my age, anybody growing up in the 70s and on knows Daredevil for his red suit. Unless you were growing up in the 60s and reading those early books, we all grew up with the red suit. They use Daredevil 2 as a comparison. And I don't know if I really look at this comparison as a viable one. But Daredevil number 2 is the second appearance of Daredevil, but it's also the second appearance of Electro. And you can see here that, Daredevil number 2 definitely sells for about double, give or take, in every grade stated here. But a second appearance, early Silver Age, second issue of the run, second appearance of the title character, and the second appearance of an awesome villain, I don't think is ever gonna stack up, or I don't think this debut of the red suit is ever gonna stack up, because I think that while the red suit is in a sense more iconic, we're more familiarized with the red suit. It's how we see Daredevil. The yellow suit is vintage. It's totally vintage, and it says vintage when we see it. It says a whole nother era. It speaks to the era, the beginning era of the Marvel age. And I think that's why the yellow suit commands such a high value in and of itself. Or at least, look, I will say this. I think Daredevil has been a character that's been undervalued in general. And you see what number 1's been doing on the market. It's finally getting its love. But I don't think that the donning of the red suit is ever going to command, say, the donning of the black suit of Spider-Man, because there was just so much there for the black suit that made that stand out. And of course, leading up into one of the greatest villains of our generation, Venom. So it's hard for me to sit here and look at this book and say it's undervalued just because it's the donning of the red suit. It's the first appearance of the classic red suit. I will say this here, though. I do think this book can be presently undervalued for a couple of reasons. One, I think Daredevil has been undervalued. I think the character in and of himself has been undervalued, and I think we're going to continue to see that in the short term, where a lot of these early books are going to keep increasing in value. And where I think it might be undervalued in context of the suit is just because in general, as other blue chip keys or high value keys for certain characters continue to increase on the market and look far out for many of us collectors on a budget, you turn to these different key elements as a more affordable book that we could go after. So if you can't afford the first appearance of Daredevil, that Daredevil number 1, if you can't afford the Daredevil number 2, what's the next best thing? And it's coming in at issue 7 of his first run, and the donning of this classic suit that we're all familiar with, I do think it makes it the next best thing. And I think that there is short-term value to be seen right now that makes this book undervalued, but I don't think it's to a huge extent where it's ever going to push it past his second appearance, or I don't ever think that collectors or hobbyists as a whole are ever going to see, oh yeah, that's the first appearance of the red suit, similar to how we say that's the first appearance of the black suit, Spider-Man, the symbiote suit. I don't think it's ever going to be on that level, but I do think there is some undervaluing going on right now. All right, folks, we got 2 more books to look at. Next up is this Tales of Suspense number 77, which is the first appearance of Peggy Carter. Man, it's also the full and cover appearance of Ultimo, but obviously Peggy Carter is what we're here for. They are looking at this book to be undervalued because of Peggy Carter, simply, what she's been doing in the What If show. We got the comic book out, the Captain Carter comic book that was released that was hot off the presses. You can see her face in the fragment of the Doctor Strange 2 poster. And with Captain 4 in development, anything can happen. I absolutely agree. Despite all of this, there hasn't been much fluctuation in sales price for this key issue, which could lead to great ROI opportunities. And they look at the numbers here. I mean, this, even going back to 2007, they said a 9.6 sold for $900. Then in 2014, a 9.6 sold for $1,100. And recently, just not even a year ago, 9.6 sold for $1,250. That was kind of in the boom of the market as well. This book hasn't increased that much. While I agree with the fact that there could be great ROI on this book, especially for a short-term flip, because this could be a book that might not, I'm not using the word undervalued, but overlooked for speculative reasons. And this is where I want to make myself clear. Speculative reasons or speculation and undervalued aren't connected at the hip. They're not synonymous, because speculation can drive a book to be overvalued, all right, in the current market. So I'm going to have to say that I disagree that this book is undervalued. I don't think this book is undervalued whatsoever. I think this book is sitting at a proper value for where it's at right now, because to be quite honest, I just don't really think people cared for Peggy Carter that much, even after she showed up in the MCU. I don't think that there was enough there inherently to drive the value of this book up. Now, if she does show up in Doctor Strange 2, if she does have a role in Captain America 4, I think this could lead to speculative value. And speculative value could lead to, what do they say right here? Great ROI opportunities, but in the short term. Because while if that happens, depending on how the MCU uses her character moving forward, we could definitely see that price cool off and drop back down. Now, that doesn't mean that this could change. It doesn't mean that maybe over the next few years, the MCU uses the Peggy Carter character as Captain Carter, and fans fall in love with the character. They fall in love, and it brings in this whole new love, like new readers want to collect Peggy Carter comics because of how they're seeing her on the big screen. And that starts driving the value of this book up, or her key books up. But still, even if that happens, it's not changing my mind about this book not being undervalued right now, because that inherent value has not been created yet. So until that value becomes created, until we get those factors created within the MCU to where we cling to the character on that level, that value isn't inherently there in the comic book, and it's still only speculative value. So this is one that I would be very careful with, but only time will tell. This is one that I think has potential future value. As we all know, these Silver Age books like this, I think will continue to increase in future value, simply, obviously, just for inflation reasons, and for the more scarcity on the market that Silver Age books are getting as they age out. But I would be careful with this. This could be a nice short-term flip. Undervalued, I'm going to have to kind of, disagree with at the current moment. All right, folks, last book on the list, and this is a fun one, Fantastic Four Annual number 6. This is the first appearance of Annihilus, ruler of the negative zone. It's also the first appearance of Franklin Richards as an unnamed infant, considered by Marvel to be the most powerful mutant in the Marvel Universe. Introduction of the Cosmic Control Rod. Let's see. Undervalued. Okay, I like how they're comparing this. They're comparing this to Mephisto's first appearance in Silver Surfer number 3. And this is why I like this comparison. I think Mephisto is going to show up in the MCU. Absolutely, without a doubt. My opinion. I also think Annihilus is going to show up in the MCU. And I have been talking for a long time now about Annihilus books. I think Annihilus books in general are undervalued. So, there you go, guys. You know my answer right there. I agree with this book being undervalued, hands down. I think Annihilus is a character that can do great things in the MCU, and I just don't know if a lot of people are too familiar with Annihilus in the comic books. But when it comes to the MCU, we already have, the Negative Zone. Franklin Richards is another one that could, we could speculate on for MCU reasons. But let's look at what they did comparing this book to Mephisto. In 2020, a 9.8 graded Silver Surfer number 3 sold for $38,400. 2 years later, a 9.8 sold for $55,200. And obviously, there's been a lot of this Mephisto hype that hasn't been panning out. I still think he's going to show up, though. Both sales occurred when there was not speculation of Mephisto appearing in the MCU. So I'm going to assume maybe they mean because when that 55,000 one, maybe it was after all the Mephisto hype. Is that so? I don't really know what that means, because there's absolutely been speculation of Mephisto appearing in the MCU, and I don't know if it's ever gone away. So I guess it depends on how you declare speculation. Maybe because it's died off, they're stating that. I don't know. But let's look at this. Similar to the 2020 sale of the Silver Surfer number 3, the Fantastic Four Annual number 6 and a 9.8 sold this month for $33,600. Both issues register 8 copies and 9.8 on the CGC census. In total, there are 2,480 graded copies of Silver Surfer number 3 versus 1,873 copies of Fantastic Four Annual number 6. Again, I just don't get too... I mean, these are, Silver Age books, but still don't get too caught up in the graded census count. It is logical to project the recent 9.8 sale will increase the value of lower grade Fantastic Four number 6, similar to Silver Surfer number 3. I'd agree there as well, absolutely. The following is a comparison by grade between first appearance of Mephisto and this first appearance of Annihilus. So you got the Silver Surfer first of Mephisto over here. You got 900 more in an 8.5, 1255 to 775, more than double here in a 6.5, more than double here in a 5.0, more than double here in a 4.0. 110 here more. So yeah, I like this comparison because I think both of them are solid villains in their own right when you talk about the comic books, and both have, I think, a solid future in the MCU. So while there is speculative value on this book right now, I do believe there is, and I do believe there's speculative value still on Mephisto. Whether or not how prominent you want to call that speculation, and if it's being talked about as much as it was during WandaVision, I don't know. But with Annihilus, remember what I was just saying about speculative value doesn't mean that it's undervalued, or you got to be careful when books garner that speculative attention. So this book can be very volatile on the market in the near future, similar to any book, to where maybe something doesn't pan out after spec hype, or maybe we forget about it and we move on and the book cools off. But for the long term, I think this book is absolutely undervalued. If the character shows up in the MCU and is done right, I think it can really drive this book up on the market. And I think once we see Annihilus in the MCU, even though maybe say Annihilus is around for 5-6 years in the MCU, and then they kill him off, whatever the case may be, and then maybe we see a dip, right? Maybe the book cools off. It's gonna hit new floors, in my opinion. It won't ever cool off to where it was before, and then it's still gonna continue to increase, because I think we're gonna always go back to Annihilus in the MCU and pair that with Annihilus's comic books. Similar to Thanos. I don't care what anybody says. Thanos, Iron Man 55 cooled off. It's coming back up, but it set new floors with Thanos being in the MCU. And that book is going to continue to increase over time. And we, as we age out And as our kids start growing up and they go back to the Blu-rays, to the Infinity Saga, they're going to be seeing Thanos. They're going to be wanting to go buy the Thanos toys, and they're going to be wanting to go buy Thanos' comic books. I think the same potential is there for Annihilus. And for our generation, Thanos wasn't always as cool as he was in the comics. For those that grew up in the 80s and 90s, I think we forget that. You know, Thanos was a little lame in his first appearances. You know, the first few story arcs he showed up in, it wasn't, you know, I read a lot of them and I wasn't too impressed. But, you know, they started building on the mythos and on the character and making a lot of changes. But his first appearance, Thanos' first appearance, is still commanding that drive as it continues to increase up now. I agree that this book is undervalued, even with the speculative hype. I think there's big things for this character in the MCU, and I can just keep repeating that until maybe we see something happen and we see how it pans out. So, those are my thoughts on these 5 books today, folks. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Overall, I will say, just to analyze what Key Collector did here, I do like what Key Collector did with this list. I'm not saying I agree with every little thing, but I love how they put all of these bullet points and all the data in. They put why these books are on the list and why they're claiming them to be undervalued. I really love what they're doing. They're not telling you to buy these books. They're not telling you to think as we do. They're not trying to manipulate your brain into saying, look, we said this, so believe it because it's on our app. No, they're posing, you know, an opinion. This is like an opinion piece, and they're providing their own, you know, facts and data and research to why they believe this to be. I think this is a very good resource, and at the end of the day, we as collectors can still think for ourselves and, you know, take away from this what we choose to take away. All right? Love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below. Remember, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you are clicking that notification bell and the like button and comment below for a chance to win that awesome CGC Signature Series first appearance of Cloak and Dagger. Thank you guys so much. Be well, and until next time.